So we have some breaking news. Bernie Sanders, according to new CBS polling, is leading in both Iowa and New Hampshire, the two first states in the 2020 Democratic primary process. In Iowa, it's a three-way tie at 23 points. Biden, Buttigieg, and Sanders. But when the delegates are thrown in, when the delegate estimates come out, Bernie Sanders has the edge. When you move over to New Hampshire, Bernie Sanders leads Joe Biden by 2 points, but there the delegate split is more even. But at the end of the day, Bernie Sanders could well exit the first two states with a lead in delegates. Now, of course, Iowa and New Hampshire are small states compared to California and New York and Texas and Florida and on and on and on. It's a small fry competition. But in the primary processes, momentum is king. And if you can do well in the first 2 or 3 or 4 states, South Carolina and Nevada sort of come right after, Iowa and New Hampshire, then you can build presidential hopes on that momentum. Or despite frontrunner status, poor performances in these early states can spell doom for your campaign. So don't underestimate the fact that Bernie Sanders winning both of these states or coming ahead with delegates at the end of the two won't be a significant momentum boost for Sanders and his campaign. There's really encouraging things here for Bernie, but there's also encouraging things here for Biden. Both Sanders and Biden are pushing for the lead in both states. Buttigieg is doing well in Iowa, Warren in New Hampshire, but at the end of the day, neither is really super competitive in both. And it looks like Biden and Sanders are going to be fighting for the delegate lead out of these first two states. Further to that, each leads in a crucial category. First, Bernie Sanders leads among enthusiasm, and enthusiasm is crucial when it comes to getting your people to go to the polls in a primary and even in a general election. In some ways, Donald Trump defeated Hillary Clinton, not just because the Electoral College is broken, and the Electoral College is broken, but because he had more enthusiasm. And it didn't really matter in blowout states, but in those really, really close states, a lack of enthusiasm for Hillary Clinton and her program is what lost her the election, or what won Donald Trump the election, however you want to look at it. And so here it's very important to see Bernie Sanders with the enthusiasm edge. In states, especially ones that are caucuses, getting people that are enthusiastic in your camp is vital, because they're the ones that are going to for sure vote, go to the caucuses, make the phone calls, bring people with them, and on and on and on. Don't underestimate enthusiasm. But it's almost as important, maybe it's more important, that you have the electability edge. And whether it's accurate or not, whether you agree with it or not, whether I agree with it or not, Joe Biden has the electability edge / the safe pick edge. There's a lot of people in this process, and that's understandable. They want to defeat Donald Trump. That's their overarching goal. And they feel, at least right now, Joe Biden is the best person to do it. Whether it's because he's seen as a moderate, whether it's because he's been vice president, whether it's because he's seen as somebody that can, capture elements of Republican support, Biden is seen as that electable pick. And so regardless of what you think of Joe Biden and his policies, or even if you really like the policies of Warren or Buttigieg or Sanders, you might be going with Biden because he's the one to beat Donald Trump. And if Bernie Sanders wants to win this thing, enthusiasm is vital, but he has to close the electability gap with Joe Biden. Now, you and I, many of my listeners, many of my watchers, we know that Joe Biden has a lot of limitations, and that in many ways, Bernie Sanders could very well be the most electable. But the average voter, the average narrative isn't there yet. And so we have to help it get there. And there's two ways to do it. The first is to attack Joe Biden, is to talk up the advantages of Bernie Sanders. So of course, we can attack Joe Biden. The way he talks often leads to gaffes. We can talk about his checkered record. We can talk about the skeletons in his closet. Even Bernie Sanders has started to do this, talking about how Joe Biden has a lot of baggage. And that baggage could well be weaponized by Trump against him and the Democrats in a general election. But the positives of Bernie Sanders in terms of electability are what has to be the focus. Bernie Sanders is not seen as electable right now because he's seen as far from the center, and because he's far from the center, he won't win moderates, he won't win independents, and on and on and on. He'll be seen as a far-left socialist, and the Democrats will lose the election because of it. That's at least the narrative coming from some people. And that his policies are, popular with elements of the Democratic Party, but maybe not with the broader population. But the thing is, Bernie Sanders' policies are widely popular. Bernie Sanders' vision is widely popular. In many ways, it speaks to the broad working class, whether they vote Democrat or Republican, and crucially, whether they vote at all. That's got to be Bernie Sanders' main push. That in the American political process, for whatever reason, there are millions and millions and millions of people who could vote, but for whatever reason don't vote. And those people are disproportionately young, lower income, racialized, otherwise marginalized people. The very sort of people Bernie Sanders' vision speaks to. Bernie's vision speaks to all Americans, or at least everybody but the millionaire and billionaire classes, but it speaks specifically to the needs of those people who are struggling the most. Bernie Sanders is a believer that everyone deserves a healthy, safe, and dignified life, and that those marginalized people need to be prioritized as we fight for those things. And here's the thing. Bernie Sanders, because of that enthusiasm, and because he does politics differently, because he runs on issues in a way we haven't seen a mainstream presidential politician run on in generations, if not ever, then he is the very sort of man to get those people to go to the polls. Those Americans, by the millions, by the tens of millions that do not vote or don't always vote, they vote infrequently. Maybe they voted in the Obama elections, but they didn't vote in the Clinton-Trump election. Turnout was down in that election. What about some of those people that didn't vote? Can you bring them back? I don't know if Joe Biden is that guy. Joe Biden might well flip Republicans, but this myth of the, millions and millions and millions of Republicans that will abandon Trump, I don't know if it's there. Trump is massively popular with his own party. And I think the ticket to victory for the Democrats probably does include flipping some Republicans. I don't think that you can ignore flipping voters, especially ones that maybe voted for you in 2008 or 2012, but didn't in 2016. But at the end of the day, if you flip non-voters, if you bring them to you, you don't need to flip Republicans to win this thing. If Democrats can get record turnout, can get Obama-level turnout, they will win this election. No doubt about it. And they will win with healthy margins. When young people and African Americans and Hispanics and poor people come out to vote, the Democrats win. And Joe Biden, much like Hillary Clinton, is not the sort of politician that inspires those populations. I just fundamentally don't believe he is. Look at the enthusiasm gap. He doesn't have that edge. And in a Democratic primary where everyone's concerned about electability, he might get away with that. But not everyone who votes in primaries. Many people who vote in primaries are amongst the most politically engaged. If you don't vote in primaries, you're still needed in the general, but you might not show up unless someone gives you a reason. Obama, whatever you think of him, whatever you think about his neoliberal legacy, the man inspired people. That's why he won massively in 2008, and that's why he won again in 2012. Simple as that. There was enthusiasm there. He got people to give enough of a damn to go to the polls. Bernie Sanders is the only one, in my estimation, in this Democratic field, who can speak to those people. And we need to do a better job at pushing that narrative. It's not just about flipping suburban Republicans and upper middle class Republicans. It's about getting the American working class in all its diversity and all its complexity to believe in a candidate and to go out and vote for them. And only Bernie Sanders can do that right now. So if Bernie Sanders and his team and all of his supporters around the internet and in real life can help push that narrative, we can maybe narrow the electability gap with Joe Biden and make this contest an even stronger one for Bernie Sanders.